I'm Adam from the Army Painter, and today we're going to be painting the Guild Ball Kickoff Set using the Army Painter Kickoff Paint Set. The magic in miniature painting is that it can be as simple or as complex as you'd like it to be. There's a plethora of great techniques out there for you to master, but with a few simple steps you can achieve some great results. Today, we're really going to be focusing in on the Army Painter spray, paint, dip, done method. And to do that, we got to start with our color primer sprays. We primed our Mason models with color primer Crystal Blue. After giving the can a very good shake, we spray at a distance of about 7 to 8 inches, about 20 centimeters away in nice fluid motion. And then we went ahead and did the same application for our Brewers using color primer Color Demonic Yellow. Now that we've primed all of the models, we're going to begin by base coating all of the fleshy bits. And for that, we're going to be using Castilian Tan. So we're going to be starting off with Castilian Tan. This is a 100% match to the Army Painter Barbarian Flesh. I'm going to add a little bit to my palette here. Perfect. So for this, I'm actually going to be using our character brush. So thin down the paint with a little bit of water, and we're just going to go over all of the fleshy bits on the model. For example, his feet here. Don't be afraid to use too thin coats. I know it seems like it won't speed up the process, but it actually will. As opposed to trying to get good even coverage with one coat of paint, it's actually much faster in the long run to apply 2 thin coats for even coverage. So here we're just basing in around the feet. Maybe a little bit sloppy here. You don't want to get too much of the flesh wash on any of the areas that you want to be blue. For example, the pant legs, the insides of the armor. But if you do, don't worry, you can go back and tidy it up with a bit of Mason blue. Just being careful not to get any of the flesh colors on the blue areas here. Taking our time, but being as quick as possible. So we've got our first coat of the flesh tone drying on our Mason. We're going to go ahead and repeat those steps with the flesh color on our Brewer here. Be honest, I'm a little bit partial to the Brewer. So here we're going to look and find the fleshy areas on this model that we want to block in, like right here. You'll notice that the flesh tone goes on much smoother over top of the primer yellow, demonic yellow, as it is a much lighter color. You might not even have to apply 2 coats here, but we still are applying very thin coats just to preserve all the quality and of the detail on the model. Some other areas of the model that obviously you're going to want to paint in with the flesh tone are on the face here and the hands here. So we're going to go ahead and finish in blocking in all of the flesh tone on this model and add a second coat to our Mason, and we'll get right back to you. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and finished up all of the flesh on our big Brewer here. I love this keg of ale right there. Really cool characteristics to these models. And you can see Now that the flesh tone has had a bit of time to dry, some of the blue is still showing through, so we're going to go ahead and apply a second coat across all of the fleshy areas on the model. Really make sure that we get a nice solid coat going here. Once we're done with that, we're going to go ahead and finish all the flesh parts across the entire range of models from the Guild Ball Kickoff Set before we move on to the next step. Now that all the fleshy bits have been based in, we're going to move on to all of the parts of the model that we want to be white, like the foamy beer spout, maybe some of the hair, and we're going to be using gold line white. Now that we've got all of the flesh tones blocked in, we're going to go on and move towards gold line white for anything that we want to have painted white on the model. For example, this loincloth here, maybe some of the models will do white hair. Any of the pieces, there's some bandages on some of these models. Like here, the little stitching. For those areas, we're going to paint them white. So give our gold line white a good shake. Just apply a little bit of it to our palette here. Gone ahead and grabbed some fresh cleaning water because we don't want to contaminate our white paint with any of the flesh tones from the previous stage. Now, especially on this blue model, we're definitely going to want to give 2 thin coats. Our white paint does provide really good coverage, but because white is a bit of a chalkier pigment, you really do want to aim to apply this nice and thin. So just going to find the pieces of this model that we want to paint white. Don't worry too much about getting it on these areas here because we are going to paint over them later. In fact, go ahead and paint over them now just to make this easier because we are trying to get these painted fast. We're just going to move on to our brewer here and show you all the stitching areas that we're going to want to paint white. Quick and effective. As you can see here, we probably won't need to do a second coat because the white goes on top of this demonic yellow color primer very, very well. So we're going to go ahead and add all of the white pieces across the entire range before we move on to our next step. The next step is to base in all of the colors that we want to be dark brown, and for that we're going to be using old boots. All right, with our browns all based in, we're going to move on to 2 new colors. We're going to do pigskin brown. This is a little bit lighter shade brown than our old boot and First Lady. We're going to be using First Lady on the hair of some models to give a nice ginger color hair tone. And then the pigskin brown we're going to be using primarily on the pants of our Brewers League. So to get started, let's go ahead and paint this model here. She looks pretty feisty with her dagger. I think she'd look great with some red hair. So we're going to base in all of the hair tones. On blue, this will definitely take 2 coats. On the yellow, probably not, as this is such a similar pigment. So just nice thin layers. Again, not to obscure any of the detail of her hair. Just nice easy brush strokes. Make sure we got that paintbrush loaded up with paint. This isn't the most precise part of this paint job and tutorial. Again, we are trying to get these models painted quick using the Armor Painter spray paint dip done method. What you're going to notice in later stages is that once we get all of these primary colors blocked in, after we dip the model, everything really comes together. It's like magic in a bottle, it really is. It's great for getting Guild Ball armies fielded on the pitch quickly, or entire armies or even regiments, I should say regiments or even armies painted quickly. So we're going to let that coat dry, and we will come back and give it another coat in a minute here. We're going to go back to our big brewer here. So the areas that we're going to be painting with the pigskin brown are the pants here. As you see, it's a nice lighter color brown, almost like a drab brown. I think this is a really nice complement to the yellow that we're going to be working with on these models. So we're just about done here with the pigskin brown. As you can see, we did the First Lady orange on some of the hair of the models. Looks really good. Just very simple, blocked in there. And we're finishing up this pigskin brown, and I want you to see it's not a very big difference between that and the old boots brown, but it's enough to add another layer of texture and contrast to the model, something that really fits with the yellow and the brown of our Brewers. For our next step, we're going to be blocking in all of the areas that we want to appear black using a darker gray mix. So the Guild Ball Kickoff set does not come with a dark gray paint, but it does come with a Skaldic black and a granite gray. We're going to mix the two of these together to produce a slightly darker gray. And give the paints a good shake. The reason we don't want to go pure black here is because after we dip the model, it's really going to darken it down a bit. So we want to give it just a shade lighter on the model before we dip it, so it doesn't darken it down too much. That way we get the contrast that we want after we dip the model. So I'm going to go ahead and load the brush with a little bit of our dark gray mixture. And the areas we're going to focus on this model, just going to be the pants here. And similar to the pigskin brown and our old boot brown, this is a nice cool contrast to the blue. Complements and contrasts the blue at the same time. So real easy here. There's no secret tricks. Just take your time, get all the coverage you need on the model. This will be a good one if we want to do black hair, for example, on this model here. And even the checker pattern on our soccer ball. Just a real steady hand, run it along the recesses of those checkers. It's kind of like coloring inside the lines here. Right now we're coloring directly inside the lines. And that about does it with our dark gray mixture. As you can see here, nice even coat across the model, really complements that bright blue. Just wait till we get the metallics on here. You can see we did our little chimpanzee, blended in that dark gray into the browns and the skin tones. And just to mix things up a bit, we added the dark gray to the top of this model, leaving the pants blue, leaving the top of this model blue, and his pants the dark gray. The boots on this little warrioress right here in the dark gray looks very cool. On a couple of the models from our Brewers clan, we added a little bit of the dark gray to some of the belts and buckles, as you can see, just for an extra added bit of contrast. With that done, I think we have just about one more color to paint, and that's going to be our metallics across the full range. Our final step in the base coat stage is to paint in all of the metallic bits. There are 2 metallic colors that come in the Kickoff Paints set, and we're going to be using each of them on each of the different factions. We're going to be using a bright silver for our Masons and a darker, more gunmetal color on the Brewers. With the trophy silver, we're just going to go ahead and pick out all of the pieces of the armor on our Mason models. And don't worry if you get a little bit onto any of the other areas. You can always grab some of our Mason blue or Army Painter Viking blue to clean up the areas that you've messed up. There's no mistakes in painting. As the late great Bob Ross said, just happy little accidents. So we're going to pick out the pieces here, like the chest plate, the shoulder pad here. And most of the weapons like we have here. There's not a whole lot of metallic areas on our Brewers, but there are a few, and we're just going to pick those out with Veterans Plate. Careful not to get any of the Veterans Plate onto the yellow areas or the brown areas. Another good area to focus on are these rivets here, these little hooks that he has hanging under his arm, and all of these little belt loops here. We're going to finish up all of the Veterans Plate on these Brewer models, and we'll check back in. With all of the base coating now complete, we're going to move on to the shading portion of this tutorial. And for that, we're going to be using Quickshade Strong Tone from the broader Army Painter range. Quickshade dips are a great way to get fantastic shading results really quickly. Before you get started, after opening the Quickshade can, you're going to want to take a stirrer. I'm using a kebab stick. It actually works really well. Give it a good stir. You don't want to shake the can because that can create bubbles. If it happens to be cool outside, unlike it is here today, it's warm and rainy outside. I do recommend doing this outside because this is a bit messy. You may want to heat up a bowl of water and just let the Quickshade can sit inside. To warm up and get those pigments nice and softened up. So what we're going to do here, I'm just going to grab the model and carefully, because you don't want to crush the base, you're going to take the model and very simply now, after it's had a chance to settle in, give it a good shake. Shake off as much of the excess as you can. And then we'll take our Brewer model and repeat the same steps. It's very, very important that you let the Quickshade dip dry for 24 to 48 hours. What's going to happen, and you'll notice, is that the Quickshade will dry, and as you can see here a little bit, it's a little bit glossy. You're going to want to tone that down a bit. Now, typically, I would use our Color Primer Anti-Shine Matte Varnish, but because it was so rainy and wet outside, I'm going to go ahead and use our War Paints bottled application and brush this on. This is very simple to do. Just like you would a paint, go ahead and brush on that matte varnish over top. It might take 2 coats. Let the first coat dry, obviously. But this will tone down that shininess. Some people like the shininess, and that's okay. It's your model. You do with it what you want. You let it look the way that you want it to. Sometimes I actually like to leave some things glossy, like the metallic areas. But for the sake of this, we're just going to apply our anti-shine matte varnish liberally across the entirety of the model. Now you can see here I also did add a nice base to the model. I started by painting the base in Old Boot Brown, and then I took just a little bit of our Battlefield's basing glue. This is a nice PVA based glue, and added a mixture of our Battlefield's Rocks and Brown Battleground. Now you could paint this if you would like, but as you'll see here, let me just open this up. It already has a nice brown texture. There's a couple different variations of color in there, some blacks, mostly browns and tans. You could add just a dry brush of like a skeleton bone or something of that nature. But I just go ahead and I paint in the PVA glue around the base, give this a dip, let that dry, and then I will apply a couple dabs of the Battlefield's basing glue. And you can use tweezers if you'd like. Sometimes you can just dip it in. We do have our hobby pliers, which are really nice. And you can just go in and pick it up like that and just apply it to the base real simply. Give it a shake off. And there you go. You've got a pretty awesome looking base in literally 5 minutes. After basing the models, our masons and our brewers are now complete. And when you factor in that this only took us about 2 days of painting and drying time, I'd say that these look fantastic. If you're interested in purchasing the Guild Ball Kickoff Paint Set, check your local retailer or go to www.thearmypainter.com. We always love to see your painting adventures, so share them with us by tagging us at The Army Painter on Facebook and Instagram.